So there's a new AI framework that just came up called PydanticAI. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what is PydanticAI framework and why is it important for you to keep an eye on it, as well as the motivation behind Pydantic and how to set it up, and you can test and see how it all works. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So Pydantic, what is Pydantic? I think the first thing we need to really hone in is understanding what is Pydantic, because you may have heard many times about Pydantic in Python. What is it? Pydantic is a Python library that allows developers to validate data. So essentially is a library used to help validate data. What is the motivation behind Pydantic? Well, the main motivation behind Pydantic is the gatekeeper for data as we program. Writing code at the center of everything, we are manipulating data. And so this data has to be sanitized, has to be validated so that we don't end up with a lot of errors, a lot of bugs in our code. So essentially by using Pydantic, we are making sure that we have a consistent structure in our data, which makes it way easier to use, but also prevents our programs from failing, from having a lot of bugs. So let's take a look at this code here. So this code is a function method that we defined called create user. Now, if you're writing a Python program that creates user, that means you would have to pass it through a validation like this. So if not instance of data, whatever we're passing along, .get age, is not type of integer, then we're going to raise a value or value error. And then we're going to check if data.name is not a string, then we're also going to say name must be string, and then return data if all of this validation is correct. No errors were found. That's wonderful. But you can imagine that if you're building high level, larger applications, this gets tedious and is very confusing. And also, as you know, the more code you write, the more prone you are to having bugs, a lot of errors, and so forth. So Pydantic comes to solve that, because now all we have to do is import the base model. So essentially we have this class that is the base model that we can use to create the structured, consistent format data. So in this case here, we'd create a class here called user and inherits from this base model, which means now we can put together the name and age. We can define name and age. So now whenever we want to create a user, we'll just say user and pass in the name as parameters, name and age. And so when we want to use that, we can actually use, say, user, because we instantiated that as such. We would have, always will have something consistent like this as a result. So that is the main idea behind Pydantic, is that it makes sure that we have a uniform, a consistent data type throughout our programs, which now our programs are able to work with this data that is consistent and not prone to errors. So no more confusions. A good analogy would be the security checkpoint at the airport. So in this case, you would have passengers. These would be considered the data, and the ID would be types. If the user has a valid ID, that means the checkpoint or the security person would let them in because they have a type, which is their ID, a valid ID, as a specific criteria that needs to be met in order for them to be able to board the airplane. If not, then they won't be able to board the airplane. So that is the idea behind Pydantic. Now, why did I go through all of that? Well, it really sets up the whole idea behind Pydantic AI. So the same company or the same people who built Pydantic or who maintain the Pydantic library, which by the way is used by many, many companies, because any company that's building software, they need to use some sort of a checker, some sort of a validator, and Pydantic is everywhere. Those are the ones who put together this Pydantic AI. Now you can see where this is going. This means that these new Pydantic AI is based off Pydantic. This idea that we have to have a solid data type safe environment when we build AI agents, when we build AI applications. So if you go to AI pydantic.dev, this is where you will see a lot of information here. We have introduction, install, installation, setup, and all of that. And you can go along and understand what that is. So Pydantic AI is a Python agent framework designed to make it less painful to build production-grade applications with generative AI. So the promise here is that less pain to build production-grade, production-level applications with generative AI. So why use Pydantic? Built by the team behind Pydantic, what I just explained, the validator layer of the OpenAI SDK, Anthropic SDK, LangChain, LaMDAX, and all of this. As I said before, Pydantic is used everywhere. In the backend, most of these tools, frameworks that we have grown to love, they use Pydantic. Okay, so all of this, so talk about type safety, full structure response, validation Pydantic. This is very important for the reasons I showed you. Structure response is very important because we want to have a structured response so we can use that down the line for our applications and so forth. Okay, streamed responses and all of that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that Pydantic is indeed in beta, which means they're still working on it, but nevertheless, it's something that you need to at least start understanding and learning how to use it. Okay, so here is a simple hello world example. Here's a minimal example of Pydantic AI. So essentially what do, you say Pydantic AI import agent. So we can actually write or use a Pydantic agent to do something. So all you do, you said agent like this, pass in the model. In this case, we're using Gemini 1.5 Flash, and you pass the prompt, system prompt. And then of course you get results. You say to run async, to run sync, where does hello world come from? And we pull in the data, which is the result. So let's go to installation and setup, because that is the fun part. So to install, we have a few options here. We can use UV or pip. I'm going to use pip. So just copy this and open your command line and just paste in and go ahead and install Pydantic. So hit enter. I already have it. That's why it was really fast. But in your case, you should be able to get that. Okay, so next what it says here, this installs Pydantic AI package, core dependencies and libraries required to use following large language models. So we can use OpenAI API, Google Vertex API for Gemini models, and Grok API. So you need to have these set up. I already have those set up under the .env file, and so make sure you have at least OpenAI set up. And you can always click here to go and set up your OpenAI API as well as the Vertex AI API or Grok API if you need to. Okay, so use it with Pydantic Logfire. This is not something we're interested in, but it's another company, I believe, tool that they have built that allows you to see how your large language models, how they're working and all of that. So let's go back to the introduction here. You can see that we have some code here. So let's see if we can get this to work. So I'm going to go ahead and create a file and say from Pydantic. In fact, I can copy all of this and new file. I'm going to say app.py. And let's go ahead and paste it all in like that. Again, make sure that you at least have in your .env file Gemini or Grok API or OpenAI API. So I'm going to use OpenAI API. Okay, make sure that's like that. And internally, Pydantic AI uses OpenAI. It's all set up, right? All you have to do is just call the model that you want to use. You don't have to import anything or load environment variables or anything. This should be just ready to go. Okay, let's go ahead and see if this works. We're going to go ahead and run. Notice it's very simple. You say Pydantic AI, we're importing agent. All right, let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, it may take a little bit. You can see now it's going to get results. So you can see Hello World originates from 1978 book, The C Programming Language. Very good. So we've written our first AI agent using Pydantic AI. All right, so if we go back down here, you can see that you can use tools, dependency, injection, and all these different things. Now let's look at this code here. Now I do realize some of you may not understand well Python, but just bear with me here. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can use Pydantic. So all of this is Pydantic based as the validator class or tool or library. The first thing we do, we can go ahead and get data classes. So data classes are classes that essentially use to mimic data, right? So user, for instance, would be more of a data class. Okay, and then we are importing the base model and fields and all of that. We have some other things, agent and run context. So in this example here is an example of database of a bank database. So just forget about that. So what really is happening here is that we can create data classes, and then we can create, in this case, this is the class support result. So here we're using the power of Pydantic as a library to mold, to create a consistent data type that is expected for our agent to use, as well as to create a response around that. Okay, so what we're saying here, we're going to create a field called supportive or support advice. It's going to be a field type, and we have the description here that says advice returned to the customer. And we have the block card. It's going to be a Boolean, true or false. In the field description, we add those things. So all of this is going to be used in a second here. Okay, so here we're creating the actual agent, right? And we pass always the model we want to use. And now here we're passing a dependent type. So we want to pass the support dependencies. What is that? Well, the support dependencies is what we have here as a data class, which is going to be customer ID and database connection. So we're saying we want to pass in the dependencies that are supportive, that are supporting our agent, because our agent will need to have access to the database. And then next we have the result type. What kind of result, what type of the result we want to show or to get in this case. And we say we want to wrap our result into support result, which is again our support result class that you see here. Every time we get result, it's going to have the supportive advice or support advice field, block card, risk, okay, to make sure that every time we get that result. And of course we pass the system prompt. Now there's other things here that we can look into more into details, but I want to say that is the basis of everything here. The rest that we're adding here, for instance, we can annotate, or in this case decorate, to say the system will know that this function here, customer balance, is a support agent tool. So it's just a tool that we can pass to the agent so he knows what to do with. So at the end here, this is how we would do. So we would instantiate the dependency support by passing the customer ID that we want to inject, and then the database connection, because that is what support dependencies do. Okay, class. And then the result here, we call the support and pass the query as well as the dependency support dependencies that we created here. So that agent knows to use, in this case, database connection to go and get information that it needs and do all sort of things. And then we can get the data back. Now, the cool thing, also remember that the support result is actually attached to the agent directly, as well as the support dependencies types. So it knows what needs to get in order for this to work flawlessly. Okay, that is an example of the code. Now, I've put together something similar so you can have an idea. Pydantic simple. So essentially, I'm doing the same thing I've shown you there, but with a simple use case. So the use case here is a travel plan. This is an overview for you to see how to put something that's kind of useful. Okay, so the same thing we did some importing here, data classes, Pydantic, and of course the agent and run context. So now we create this data class here. This is called the travel dependencies. So I want to make sure that we have user ID and user preference. So this could be something that we can inject user preferences in a larger system or workflow. Now I have the class travel plan here. This is going to be based off of base model. So in this case, we have destination, we have dates, we have budget, we have itinerary, and all of that. And so each one of these types have string, float, string types, and each one has a field, and we pass in the description. Now you have to pass the actual descriptions because this framework is going to be able to create these fields and to know exactly what they are, which is going to be part of pushing that into the large language model so it knows what it's dealing with. All right, so then we do the same thing. We instantiate an agent. We pass in OpenAI GPT 4.0. You can pass any model you want. And then we pass dependence type with one travel dependencies. So which is this guy here. So it needs to pass an ID and user's preference as a dictionary. Result type, the result type is going to be travel plan. We want to have destination, dates, budget, and itinerary. All right. And of course, we pass the system prompt to tell what you are, what you know, in this case, the agent, what it needs to know, what it is really, what it does well, okay, to prompt it. We're decorating this function here with our travel agent.system prompt. which means we pass the context here, then we pass in a list as a list travel dependencies. So we just set up the preferences to the user preferences. So we go to the current context of this workflow and get the user preference, as well as then setting up the preferred airline to get the preferred airline, any airline in this case. So we can set up all these things that we might want to set up, and then return here the user prefers to travel with whatever we pass there. Okay, we have a tool here that we can pass, right? As an example, we can say available flights. So this could be us, for instance, getting information from an API or database or whatever it is that we're getting information from. But in this case here, we have returning here some implementation for available flights. So obviously you probably would be doing some API calls to somewhere. And then what we do is we have the main. So this is where we have the dependency. So the dependencies, travel dependencies, the things that we will need to pass to the AI agent, we pass the ID, just a random ID, and user preference. So preferred airline, for instance, is Delta, hotel type, boutique, right? We can change that. We can make it so that people actually add it themselves, but just an example. And then we have a few examples here. So I have this one example too. Let's start with example 1 so we can run. Okay, so in this case here, I'm going to call the travel agent run. I'm going to pass plan a trip to Paris for next month under $1,500. Because I'm calling run on travel agent, it's going to expect me to pass a few things. One of the things that we need to pass is dependencies. So travel dependencies, we pass them there, which is this information here. So you can see we're injecting things at runtime for our agent to have this context. And we're going to print the results. The result's going to be something similar to this. Let's go ahead and run. Okay, so we have this result, travel run, travel agent at run. So it's going through all of the dependencies and everything, and we should get a result soon. Okay, so after a few moments here, you can see that destination is Paris, dates next month, budget is that. Okay, and then we have itinerary, flight, departure with a Delta flight. Cost is $350, and then we have accommodation, stay at the Eiffel Boutique, and all this. So it even knows that we want for the hotel to be boutique style. All right, so with price under $50 per night, this boutique hotel will allow a stay of about 7 days for $10.50. All right, so we have activities, daily activities that we can do till day 4, day 3, day 1, day 2. And day 6, this is what we do. And day 7, this is what we do. And let's see, restaurant, budget monitoring, keep track of remaining 100 for incidental expenses, metro passes, and additional meals. And there you have it. There we go. So what I want to do now, I can go ahead and comment this out and have this other use case here. So now we have specific details. So what are my flight options to Paris? We pass the details, we pass the dependencies as always, and then we should have something like this because we're asking the flight options to Paris. Okay, let's see what will happen. This is what's the question, and voila. Right away, destination Paris, dates any, budget 0, itinerary flights 1, flight this, Delta, and Air France at 400. Okay, so this is the information that we actually marked here. All right, so now let's go to the next part, which is to look at examples that comes with PydanticAI, which is really exciting because now you can see some other use cases that you can play around with and look at the code and just see what you can do. Remember, this is still the beginning stages, but I think it's important for us to keep an eye on this because we never know. New tools are always welcome. So let's go back to our page here. Let's go to examples, click on examples of how to use PydanticAI and what it can do. Okay, so these examples are distributed with PydanticAI, so you can run them either by cloning Pydantic repo or by simply installing PydanticAI locally. I like this better. So installing required Pydantic, run this pip install PydanticAI examples. Okay, let's go ahead and run this pip install PydanticAI examples. I already have installed, that's why it was really fast. So once you do that, of course, you're not going to see anything because it all comes as a dependency. So let's go ahead and clear. Make sure again that you have OpenAI API key set up. Okay, how to run those examples. To run those examples, for instance, you say Python -m Pydantic examples dot and then the name of the module you want to play around with. Okay, let's start with this one here. This is Pydantic model. So it's the first one I showed you where it just tells you about the C programming language hello world. So let's go ahead and copy this, run real quick to see if we get anything. Okay, so it says here it's using model OpenAI GPT-4o, agent run prompt, the Windy City. Oh, this is actually different. It's not what I thought. So it says here the prompt is the Windy City in the US in the US of A. And then we have model request run step 1, handle model response, and then city is going to be Chicago, country United States of America. Okay, it gives us even the cost, how much it costs to run this. So token 67, response token, in this case is 21, so this is request tokens, and total tokens is 88. Okay, details, accepted, prediction, and all of that great stuff. All right, so there we go. It works. Now, the cool thing also is you may say, okay, how do I find out about all the examples? Well, if you go down here, you can actually get all of those examples. Or if you go to up here to the repo, I'm going to right click and open a new tab. You can see the examples they have here. So PydanticAI examples, click. You can see we have many examples. We have bank support, chat, and roulette, and all of that. Now, the great thing also that you can do is you can actually install locally, pull in, I should say locally, all of these examples. So you can run them locally and do all sort of things. So if you come back here, you will see if you scroll all the way down, it says here, you probably want to edit examples in addition to just running them. Yes, so you can copy the examples to your new directory with this command. So I'm going to copy this, paste it all in, and so what will happen is going to copy this example folder into our project here. And you can see now I have examples folder. So now I can actually look at the code, look at everything. And so what I will do, actually, let me go ahead and find this Pydantic model, which is this code here. So you can see that is what we ran just now, this windy city in the US of A. And it's nice because you can see the actual how a PydanticAI formats, how it puts together everything. So let's go ahead and take a look because I think it's good for us. Okay, so you can see here we have some imports and all of that. Logfire, we're not looking into that, but look at this. We have this model, base model here to say this is my model, the data that I'm going to use with the AI. Okay, so we say you want a city and country. So in this case here, we're getting our model, PydanticAI model, which is OpenAI GPT-4o. And so we're going to print the model. So this is just what you saw earlier where we're able to see the model information and so forth. All right, so now we create the agent. So the agent again needs the model. Where can we get the model? This one here. And then result type is going to be my model. We want to make sure that the type is congruent, is consistent, and is validated. That's why we created here. All right. And then we run this and then we get a result and we also can get the cost. That's why we saw what we saw. Okay. So we can actually see the code that we were running. I think the one that we're going to run is this chat app here. So you can see as a model, it's got a lot of things. So we have the chat HTML, the chat app, and the chat TS for TypeScript. So there's a lot of code here. We don't need to go through that, but just to show you that we can actually run and have some sort of a chat box where we can chat just like you do with ChatGPT. It's pretty cool. Well, there's two ways. Now we can run this locally. I'm going to show you how to run this. I'm going to show you how to run using the dependency that we installed. And then I'm going to say, I want to run, I think we can call it chat app like this. Okay, so we're running through the dependencies that we installed, not from our example. So let's see if this is going to work. All right, so it is working just like that, folks. You can see that it's actually being served in our local 8000 port. So if you say command click, that's going to open this. Look at that. Now, because I ran this before, it has history. So it's actually able to save the memory of what I've asked before. So let me go ahead and say, tell me about the simplest Python game. Right? Let's see what's going to happen. Guess number. Very good. And look how fast this thing is, right? It's streaming everything. All right, so very good. So we even have the code here. That looks wonderful. Tell me about the game of life. I think that's the most popular one. So it gives us the rules and everything. I just love how fast this is. It's wonderful. And I'm going to say, can you implement the game of life in Python? Make sure the colors are random as well, but it will infer what I really meant to. Okay, so it's now writing the code of the game of life, I believe. So let's see if this works. It tells us exactly what to do. So it says install pygame and all of that to run this. So how can you implement this? I'm going to go copy this and see if this actually works. Game.py. Let me put all of that. Okay, we need to say p. Let's go and say pip install pygame. I'm going to ask how to run this. Okay, just say python and game.py. Let's see. And just like that, you can see we have the game of life with the random colors. All right, it's pretty nice. It's very cool. Now, if you want to run, obviously, the ones that you have here, you can run the same thing, right? So if I come down here, if you want, let's say we want to run this weather agent. Now, for the weather agent, there are a few things you need to be aware of. We need to have the weather API, the geo API, and other things. So what you will have to do, and if you can come here and go to the weather agent, click this will give you all the things that you need to be able to run that. So you can just go to tomorrow.io and get the API key, and go to geocode maps, go ahead and get the API key and add those inside. Okay, only then are you going to be able to say Python and run that. Now I can run locally, or I can run using, in this case, the module or the dependency that we installed. Okay, now because I already have all that set up, I'm going to run this weather agent real quick. So I'm going to say Python 3. Okay, this is problematic because I need to go into examples. So cd examples. Then I can go ahead and do this, and I should be able to get the response. Okay, there we go. It was able to go and do all these things it needs to do. Let's look at the payload here. It went through the agent. The prompt is what you see here. What is the weather like in London and Wiltshire? Went to the models, run step 1, handle model response, and is running some tools to go and get latitude and longitude. Calling the geocode API twice to get the information, and then handle model response, and then running the get weather and get weather by calling the weather API, as you can see here. And then we get the result here. So result, this is what's ran, all messages. Be concise and reply with one sentence. This is just the system prompt, and the prompt is what you saw, and then we got the timestamp and all of that. And so we got the location. Here we're showing the payload, of course, of what was received, the model structured response and everything. And in the end, we got the final response, of course, the weather and everything. And then model text response in London is that. All right. Very good. And so, of course, the actual response that we get is this. Now, if you go to the weather agent, you can change things, of course, right? Especially if you want to change the query. So I can say, what is the weather like in Busan? So let's go back here, and I'm going to run the same command, and it should go ahead and hopefully get that information. Looks like it doesn't like it. Too many requests. Okay, let's just say, sometimes it does that, I notice. Not end, it's just in Korea. That's why I was like, no. Okay, let's run again. Okay, so now it knows. And the weather in Busan, South Korea is 5 degrees Celsius. Now, if I want, of course, I can change this, say in both Celsius and Fahrenheit. I think that's how you write Fahrenheit. But the good thing about large language models is that it knows how to self-correct. Okay, let's see. And there you go. So the weather in Busan, Korea is mostly clear with temperature 5 degrees Celsius, which is 41 Fahrenheit. All right, there you have it. So now you know how to navigate this new AI framework that allows you to create AI-based applications, in this case agents, which is pretty amazing because it's very solid. The thing that you see here is that it's heavily code-based, which is a good thing, especially if you want to learn how to code and really get the gist of it. And the great thing about that I like about this is that it's heavily code-based, but everything result-wise, because it's using Pydantic, makes sense. Everything is clear in a sense, the responses that we input and will receive to pass down line to the large language models and maybe other systems that we want to pass the information to. It may not seem like a huge deal, but it is indeed a huge deal because the format of data is very important. It's like having people who don't speak the same language. It's going to be very difficult to pass information around. When you have a consistent format, type, language, it's way easier. And we've just gained yet one more framework, AI framework, to create AI agents. So I'm very excited about this. Let me know what you think of this, if this is something you're excited about, if you want me to talk more about this. And I want to hear everything. Use cases, what are you thinking this is going? To me, I think it's a good thing, and we're going to keep learning more and more. Thank you so much for your time. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. And till next time, be well.